Do you remember when I found prison letters in a $3,000 mainline hooker desk? Well, I forgot to tell you, I also picked up the matching triple dresser and nightstand from the same estate sale. Cha-ching. These bad boys are going to be worth a lot once they're cleaned up, so let's get started. I sanded everything down with 120 grit. The nightstand was in bad condition, so that needed a little extra love. I used oxalic acid from Real Milk Paint Company. I eyeballed a 1:8 ratio of wood bleach to water and applied it with an old paintbrush. And while that dried, I rescued the floppy veneer with some wood glue and filled in the chip veneer with epoxy putty. Then came the fun part. I took Real Milk Paint Company hemp oil and slathered it on with my hands. This is always so satisfying and therapeutic for me. It brought out all the highlights in the wood grain and made it look so pretty. I sprayed the hardware with some gold spray paint and added some soft clear wax to the drawer slides so that they would glide better. Here's the before and here's the after. I am dying over the contrasting base and body of this dresser. It's like definition of mid-century modern. The wood grain is just delicious. This $4,000 Paul McCobb dresser was my worst and most expensive furniture flip to date. I got it for $60 from a guy who completely butchered it, but joke's on me because I also butchered this. Not once, but 5 times. Yep, I refinished this 5 times. I probably did over 10 rounds of wood bleach. I sanded each drawer for 3+ hours and the black specks still remained. On my 4th attempt, I decided to just seal it with oil-based poly because that's foolproof, right? Again, joke's on me because it looked awful. So I gave myself 24 hours to grieve before I sanded it all off and started again. This time around, I used oil-based wood conditioner and prairie wheat gel stain by General Finishes. It went on so much better than the previous finishes I was attempting. So learn from me, use a pre-conditioner when staining solid maple. I then sealed everything up with some satin lacquer and polished the cute golf tee hardware with Brasso. And as a reminder, here's the before and here's the after. I guess 5th time is the charm because it kind of came out decent. I've been working on this dresser for over a year now, and I've put at least 40 hours into this piece. Now, what should I sell it for? Okay guys, I'm retiring from flipping furniture because I finally found the piece that I've been searching for since day one, a Lane Acclaim dresser, except this one was meant to be painted. It had a laminate top and half of the veneer was destroyed on the side, which I didn't know about until I made the 3-hour round trip to go get it. I started to prep it for paint by cleaning it with Crud Cutter and fixing the broken veneer with Bondo. This wasn't the prettiest Bondo job, but again, I'm gonna paint it. So I sanded the rest of the veneer with 120 grit, and I absolutely adore the wooden veneer dovetail fronts. I never thought I'd actually get my hands on a Lane Acclaim piece, let alone for $50. But then I oiled up and remembered I can actually fix the veneer instead of painting it. So I did just that by using my Mohawk Blend-All sticks. They're like little wood-colored wax crayons. It took a lot of layering and blending, but check out the difference it made. Here's the before and here's the after. I'm pretty proud of myself for this one. Now that I think about it, maybe I shouldn't retire. Now I need to find my Lane Acclaim unicorn that doesn't have a laminate top. Regardless, I love this one and I'm extra tempted to keep it. Last month, I turned our ugly spare room into this creative and colorful home office. I spend a lot of time in here, so I noticed that I kept staring at my ugly outlets. I tried covering them with plants, but it still bugged me. So I decided to give them a little bit of a funky upgrade with Top Greener's Elite Series outlets, wall plates, and rocker switches in the color rose gold. They were very easy to install, and it only took me about 30 minutes to install 5 outlets and 3 rocker switches. The wall covers are also screwless, which I think gives it a really clean look. It gave my home office the perfect final touch that it needed. Now, staring at my outlet covers all day doesn't sound too bad. I audibly gasped when my uncle sent me a picture of this slatted mid-century modern bench that he had, and I immediately knew what it was, so I offered to refinish it on my trip home. With limited supplies, I made it happen somehow, using my battery-operated orbital sander and 120 grit sandpaper, working my way up to 180 and 220. Thankfully, the finish came off so easily. I didn't touch the legs of this piece because they were in good condition, so I was praying that this leftover stain would be a good match, and miraculously, it was. After the stain dried, I applied 3 coats of a wipe-on polyurethane, and I like to hand sand with a high grit sandpaper between coats. Then the transformation was finally complete. Now here's the before and here's the after. This flip was such a great example of how simple and easy it can be to revive old wood furniture. I have $125,000 in student loans and I'm trying to pay it off by flipping furniture. I thrifted this mid-century modern dresser for $100 and my plan is to flip it for profit. I started by wiping down the outside with some soap and water. The inside had so much dust, so I was sure to clean that as well. Then I moved on to removing the old finish on the top and the drawer fronts with 120 grit sandpaper. Now here's where things get controversial. I felt like this dresser needed a little something, so I added paint, yes, I said paint, to the built-in drawer pulls with this pretty charcoal color. Once that dried, I applied an oil-based polyurethane to seal all the areas I previously sanded. And as you know, my motto is to work smarter, not harder, so the sides of this dresser were still in great shape, so I didn't sand those. I just applied a moisturizing wood oil, which totally made the veneer look like new again. Now remember, here's the before and here's the after. I personally don't think it turned out too bad. You know what's worse than sad beige paint? Well, red paint then covered in baby blue paint on $1,800 nightstands. I picked these up off a Facebook Marketplace for $30 and I found a huge bullet inside. Got straight to work by chemically stripping off all of the paint. This stripper isn't the most efficient, so I used my carbide scraper to remove any of the remaining paint. I sanded everything smooth with 120 grit, and to remove some of the dark spots, I applied a few rounds of oxalic acid and scrubbed with a fine steel wool. I used epoxy putty to repair any areas of chip veneer, and once that cured, I sanded it flush with 120 grit. I decided to go with a fruitwood gel stain to stay true to the original blonde finish. To color match my repairs, I used Mohawk blend out sticks and I sealed it all in with vinyl sealer. The last step was to seal the entire piece with satin lacquer. Now remember, here's the before and here's the after. I am very happy with how they turned out. Stripping paint is not for the faint of heart, and I'm glad I didn't give up. I ended up selling the pair for $800, which I thought was fair. So I can officially say that I have been catfished. And buy a piece of furniture. I brought this thing home for $60, and it was the first time I had ever seen an old radio console with drawers like this. The metal slides had me puzzled. I figured it was just a unique piece, so I continued as normal by giving it a good clean and removing the hardware. For this flip, I ended up using Hart's Random Orbital Sander. I wish I had tried a battery-operated sander sooner because I'm not sure I'll ever go back to a corded sander. It was amazing, and there was one less cord to trip over. I also used my Hart multi-tool with the sander attachment to get into all the hard-to-reach places. And for a stain, I applied one coat of this raw umber glaze and wiped off any excess. I was so confused because the stain took so much nicer on the top versus the drawers, and that's when it all clicked. This piece used to have a TV in it, like this one right here. So someone must have taken out the TV and installed these DIY plywood beadboard drawers. Kind of genius. Once I applied a few coats of wipe-on poly, the transformation was complete. Now here's the before and here's the after. I personally love the contrast. If I had to do it over, I'd probably put some walnut veneer on the drawers to have it exactly match the top, but overall, I think it looks pretty good. Now I just need to figure out how to get the stereo to work, but that's a problem for another day. So some may see a desk, but I see dollar signs. I immediately recognized the solid maple Crawford desk, and I bought it for $60. I started by cleaning the piece to get a better idea of what I was working with. I used 120 grit to remove any of the old finish, which thankfully came off pretty easily, but sanding did not help remove the dark stain on the top of the desk at all. I did try a few rounds of oxalic acid, which didn't work, neither did a hot iron, so I decided to just go ahead and apply some oil-based preconditioner and then a coat of fruitwood gel stain. I was honestly really stumped about the dark stains, and I knew my typical wax crayons wouldn't cut it, so I went back to the basics, color theory. I usually use an orange-red pigment under my concealer to hide dark marks, so I figured if that color correction works on my skin, it should work on wood too, right? Girl math. I got to the closest color match that I could, and then I added some graining details. I sealed it all up with a few coats of some semi-gloss lacquer. Now, here's the before and here's the after. While it's not perfect, it was definitely a learning experience. I guess it's time to practice my inline painting skills. There are just some legs I'd recognize anywhere, especially on Facebook Marketplace. So when I saw this Boomerang coffee table, I immediately messaged the seller and paid her asking price of $150, which I thought was way too expensive, but this table is my Roman Empire, so I sucked it up. After a good clean, I sanded off the old finish with 120 grit, which revealed this dreamy two-tone. I wanted a simple and durable finish, so I slathered on some tung oil. It looked delicious. I'll apply about 5 to 6 coats total, waiting a few hours between each coat, and lastly, I used some veneer paint to fix some small blemishes, and the transformation was complete. Now here's the before and here's the after. I can't believe how just a little bit of oil revived this table, and it was so easy too. I just love this table so much, but I still can't confirm if this table is Adrian Pearsall or Kohler because it doesn't have a maker's mark. So